One of the more another decently well-known one used by the pros is ask a question not relative to poker. Don't be too obvious about it. Like they suggest how's the weather, but any pro or any good player who knows you're asking such a random question is going to know the tell you're looking for. So they're going to try to avoid giving you it, even though this one's hard to avoid. The tell is that when confronted with a random question, like say it was how's the weather, even though I try and if I try and use it, like, and we're in a serious pot and this guy, re-raises me, after the turn, even though I bet a heavy amount, the pot's pretty big, I'll ask him a question, maybe like something related to the last hand, or kind of like say something out of the side of my mouth, like you have ace king this time, like with a pair of aces, and hopefully, usually I try and get a response, and that might give you a yes or no kind of response, but if not, he sometimes gives you a response like, well, I don't know, maybe I could have played it like that or something like that. Bottom line of the tell, pausing in between speaking or answering a question. Say I did ask him how's the weather today. He would go like, I don't know, maybe it was 85 or pretty sunny out, right? Kind of pausing. They're trying to make up that story in their head because they're so concentrated on bluffing and hoping you don't call. They're kind of sidetracked and they're not really able to process and answer a question quickly and logically, as opposed to someone who's making a good bet. Their bet's in, they want you to call, they're going to be ready to interact with you and, answer your question appropriately. Oh, it was 85 and sunny, it rained a little bit after this, or in the afternoon around 2 p.m. They're not going to be stuttering in their story and showing half-second pauses because the bluffer who's lying and trying to sow, and is deceiving you with his bet is kind of trying to think of the story as he goes. So try and ask him something non-poker related, but not completely random, like how was your dog Toto or something like that, because he's going to try and fool you. Even though, like I said, it's hard to, even if I'm if I'm asked with that question, and I don't know, I might stutter because I am bluffing. It's kind of hard to avoid, but if he knows you're asking such a random question, he might sit there and think for just like a half a second something you might not be able to notice. Again, before he even speaks, if he pauses for about a half second to a second, that could be enough information to you right there. If you ask me the question and he's all right. If I pause for a little bit, that's the tell right there as well. So people who can't speak a fluent sentence or answer to you are usually bluffing if you ask them a relatively simple question, not related to poker, but not too far out there either. This is one that's online, and I've seen, and it's worked many times for me. It's actually one of my most accurate tells, not the most helpful. There's a big difference there, but it's true 95% of the time. Let me get a flop here that will help me describe my situation. This flop comes 2 king 8. I completely pointed in the wrong order. 8 king 2. Sorry, it's backwards for me. All diamonds. This guy goes like this. He has 95% of the time. This has been right for me every time I've seen the cards turned over, and I'm assuming it's been right about 95% of the time. His cards are not suited. You might look at me and be like, wow, that's probably the dumbest thing I've ever heard. How can that be of any use? You can eliminate that he has a flush right now. And I'm telling you, 96% of the time you'll be right. You might backfire once and maybe, go all in assuming he doesn't have a flush. Point of this is, when you have suited cards, you remember that. You remember if you're sticking in a hand with Queen Jack, you're like, oh, Queen Jack hearts. It's one suit. You remember when you have suited cards. So when 3 hearts come out on the flop, if you had Queen Jack a diamond, say here, I know I made my flush. I don't need to do this. I know I had diamonds. It's an easy hand to remember. They're connected to Queen Jack, or they could have a hand, like Ace 6. They'll remember an ace suited. When they glance back like that, they're checking to see if they have a diamond. Now, you can't rule out that they don't have a diamond or that they do. So they could very well be on a flush draw. He could be on a hand like Ace of Diamonds, King of Clubs, exactly like I have here. Well, that's an Ace of Hearts. So that's an Ace of Diamonds. He could have a high ace. That could be the nut flush. But 96% of the time, he does not have a flush just yet. So you can rule that out of the possibility with his betting pattern that he might be either betting on an ace high, trying to draw to the nuts, or, he could be completely bluffing. But he does not have a flush when he peeks his hole cards after the flop like that. After a perfect, not a perfect flop, all the same suit flop. He does not have 2 diamonds in his hand right now. When I go like this, no chance I have 2 diamonds. So it tells you he does not have the flush right now. If he is betting and I'm calling, because I'm calling what's the flop? King 8-2. I have a pair of kings with a jack kicker. I'm calling his bet because I saw him peek at his cards. He probably has an ace of diamonds and like 10 of spades or something like that, and he might be on a flush draw. So call that guy. If that diamond comes up and you see him bet aggressive again, then you can probably be pretty safe. He might have made his flush draw. It's always hard to continue a hand when there's 4 to a flush on the board. That's just a really tricky situation. I might make a whole video on that because it's really difficult. It's so easy to be bluffed because all they have to have is one diamond in their hand, whether it be the 2 of diamonds or the ace of diamonds. If you don't have a diamond, it's almost impossible to call some bets. So that's where your reads really come in handy, and then where this one can be good. So if he's kind of semi-bluffing on the flop and you call him, semi-bluffing on the turn, you call him, and there's no diamond that hits on the turn or river, he bluffs at it again, you should call him if you put him on that flush draw because he did not get there. He did not have a flush off the flop after he peeks at his whole cards with an all-one suit flop. So that's a very, very accurate tell. Not the most helpful, but still very good. Lastly, guys, last tell here that I've kind of noticed works from me. It's maybe a little bit of a tell. There's a tell related to it where if I'm about to bet and somebody grabs their chips, it's very similar to that, and I'll tell you what it means here in a sec. But say this is my stack. Let's put this back in the frame a little bit. It's a pretty weak stack. Oh, I got a lot of reds, so I got a lot of 50s. Again, just for quick reference, green 5, blue 10, orange 20, red 50. If I'm sitting here like this, the river cards come down. It's after the river. Just say it's me and one other guy. He's the dealer. I have to act first. Say there's, let's just put 200 in the pot. I am trying to make a bet like, no, sorry, I'm sorry, I completely reversed that. I'm the dealer. He gets to act first. He's gonna act. He throws in, say this was his chip stack over here. He bets 110, so he bets just over half the pot. He puts in 110. There's the pot back here. So now there's 310 in the pot. I need to figure out whether or not I need to call 110. Now, there's a point where this tell is useful if done fairly, I guess would be the quote. There's an extent you don't want to be making this move, and it would be so-called like Bush League or bad poker etiquette. What I'm talking about is you go like this, you kind of gather the chips in hand, which is perfectly legal. Nothing wrong with that. You can count out how many chips, if it's a big bet, whatever, if you have to count your chips. This is perfectly legal, but the moment you start moving your hand forward, or maybe you even kind of lean in like you're ready to call, if he does this with his hand, if he's sitting there with his hand, he's kind of sitting like there. It might even be a bigger bet too. He probably would put a bigger bet if he's really worried about you, calling, or maybe not. Let's just keep it at 110. But it could be a bigger bet. He could have bet the pot. He could have overbet the pot, trying to make it look like a bluff, or maybe but he really wants you to call you. When you start going forward initially, and he does this. Like he picks up his cards like this, about ready to turn them over, when you've only began your forward motion, if you see that, keep putting your chips in, call him. The tell is, this guy is trying to deceive you, act like he's eager to flip over his cards, but 8 out of 10 times, he's trying to make sure, right, when he sees you do this first motion, he's trying to act like he's eager to turn it over, so you see it, and maybe you stop the motion, and maybe fold, because he looks so eager, ready to turn over his cards. Again, strong is weak, weak is strong. He's only trying to deceive you when he's eager to flip over his cards. When you see that, you should only be reassured. If you were thinking about making the call, you should be even more reassured to throw in your 110, and you should win that pot most of the time. Like I said, it's the same thing with the chips as well. Somebody which is not as not as different, but if someone behind you is kind of nonchalantly doing this, then you start messing with your chips a little bit. You don't even have to do forward motion here or anything. Then once they see you start like counting on some sacks, then they go like this. Again, probably weak. That one's a little more, maybe 60% of the time he's weak, 65% of the time. That one's a little more of a coin flip, not as dominant of a tell. He could actually be interested in calling you, but a lot of times it's I'm ready to call your bet. If you put in 100, my hand's on red, I'm ready to call you. A lot of times he's trying to deceive you. He's going to fold if you make that bet. But this is the same situation where I was saying it could be Bush League. Don't do this. I mean, if it's house rules and whatever, or I mean, like when you're just playing with buddies, no one's gonna, if you don't be doing like this, try and get a read like you're about to drop it in, because the technical rule for what a lot of people play is chips hitting the felt, or in this case, I'm on a stupid ping pong table, but when the chips hit the felt, that's when my call is. So this is kind of like, but to do this, act like you're putting in your chips to try and get this read off him is not, that's bush league. But if you see it right when you're just starting to where you're just putting your chips in, that should only reassure you. Don't pull him back now, one, because that's bush league, because it looks like you're faking him out, and two, you should be more reassured, because when he grabs his cards like this, acting like he's so ready to show you, three aces, he's trying to get you to do this, exactly this, and like he's worried about your hand, and pull that bet back, toss your hand in the muck. So that's what he wants. Don't do it. You see this, only a reassurance that you should make that call. But again, don't take advantage of it. Every close pot, don't be going like this, acting like you're, so close to dropping the chips, like right here. Don't be doing this bullshit or something like that. But if you just kind of catch it real quick out of the corner of your eye, that you start to move forward, or he might even start doing it. He might even start doing it, right as you do touch your chips. He might start like acting, kind of have his hand on it, or his hand on his cards. 75, 78% of the time, I would say he has a weak hand. It's worked for me. Like I said, this is the exact same scenario as the chips, which is a proven technique that the pros use. I haven't seen this one anywhere. It's just kind of like my tell that I've noticed, at least against the friends I play against, and it makes sense. Like I said, people like this are trying to act eager. That's what they want to know. So I think it's a super good tell that if you're kind of 50-50, maybe you're thinking about the call and you're like this, if you're just starting and he does this and you really want to pull back your bet, it's fine. Don't just be exaggerating it, really trying to get a read off them. But when you see that, put your chips in, call him. He's just trying to deceive you that he has a strong hand.